sexy people. It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another sexy album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new release from Portland progressive sludge masters, Lord Dying. The band's new album, Clandestine Transcendence, will be released on January 19th via MNRK Heavy.
Monarch! Or Monarch, sorry. Monarch.
You like it. Formed in 2010, a pair of albums powered by skull-crushing riffs and confrontational howls introduced the Doom Dogs to the world. In 2019, they delivered Mysterium Tremendum, a record Kerrang declared a prog metal masterpiece.
Oh.
The heady and adventurous existential meditation on death kicked off a trilogy. That story continues in 2023 with an increasingly ambitious follow-up, Clandestine Transcendence, being their fourth full-length album. Although technically we're into 2024, but we'll let that slide, Lisa. Mysterium Tremendum.
How long you had it?
That's a good point. I don't know, actually.
Yeah.
Possibly last year.
I've got your back, Lisa. Oh, this young, hot-looking bastard up into you.
Mysterium Tremendum, Latin for awe-inspiring mystery or terrible mystery, depending on one's view of existence, began a narrative centered on a central character the band calls the Dreamer. The conceptual themes drove expansive, sometimes monstrous, and even plaintive and vulnerable music. Olsen describes the Dreamer as an immortal being that wants to die. On Clandestine Transcendence, he gets that wish. This one is about what happens beyond death, the frontman explains. Woven throughout the songs, that story and its rich thematic material inform an immersive listen. Tension, drama, and atmosphere abound all over songs like The Universe is Weeping and Unto Becoming. Ultimately, the album is about self-discovery and becoming what you want to become in the face of adversity, no matter how the cards are stacked against you. As with the previous album, Olsen and Evans composed all the music and demoed it before arriving at the studio. Which studio, I hear you say?
Wait, sorry, I missed my cue. Dave, which studio?
That would be Converge guitarist Kurt Ballew's God City studio. The band say Kurt is fantastic. Yes. Well, you know.
Well, yeah. Yet to hear a bad word against him or hear anything produced that I don't like. So.
It was a real pleasure working with him, Olsen says. He was very familiar with the demo as he'd listened to it a lot. We knew where we wanted to go with it. So, Duncan, Lord Dying, and Clandestine Transcendence.
I misheard you. I thought you said hot dang. I was like, hot dang?
Hot dang.
What are we doing here?
Maybe start some reviews like that from now on.
Hot dang! Hooba stink. For no reason. Okay. Should use that as that should be like when someone blindsides you with a bit of information. Hooba stink! You know what I mean?
It could be a really heavy riff.
Hooba
stink.
Out of nowhere, he just drops this massive hooba stink right in the middle of the pit. What?
Okay. This is a weird one because Lord Dying are a band I've heard mentioned and like referenced on occasion, but I've never actually went in and listened to their back catalogue at all. Until now, that is obviously.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Chat GDP. What do I think about this album? Is that an off-air joke?
Yeah. You won't get that. It's wasted on you. Yeah, I think like after going back and kind of listening to the previous releases, I think one of the main things I've kind of taken away from listening to this album is the kind of amount of growth this band have shown over 4 albums. If you go back to like 2013 to Summon the Faithless, and then listen to this album after hearing that, it's like the changes are massively noticeable, and the improvements are as well, actually. But saying that, I quite enjoyed that debut. It's got a kind of grisly, kind of sludgy style to it. There's something quite primal about it. But as you start to kind of travel through the band's catalogue, you can hear their sound start to transform, which I think it sounds like it was maybe experimentation to begin with, but like over time it's developed and it's expanded over the years to bring us to this point on Clandestine Transcendence. I know the last album got a lot of praise for being a prog masterpiece.
Dave, perchance, may I stop this review to ask why the quotation marks of the word prog? Are you saying that maybe Kerrang maybe has issues differentiating genres of metal?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'm just I'm not.
Come on, fire the shots.
I'm not a reader of Kerrang anymore, to be honest, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But we'll not get into that because it's going to take over this video. So I'll just
double the length of this review right now.
Let me just talk about Kerrang magazine for a second.
The first song of the previous album starts off with, "Let me get through this, and we'll get to the album review."
Yeah, I think when I went back to the previous albums, it was probably the one I found most difficult to get into. It is one that does go into the kind of proggy weeds a little bit too much for me at times. Whereas I found like the first album was an instant kind of connection with it. I just kind of got into it, but it's probably down to the style as well. It's one of those albums that kind of takes a bit of time to kind of grow. This album, I think, is far more balanced for me. It doesn't feel like tilted towards one particular genre. It's still very kind of diverse sounding. Probably our most diverse album out of the kind of the last four. Also, it's almost an hour long, so that is making it kind of the longest release they've had to date. And I'm okay with like long hour albums. I don't have an issue with that. I think for that type of runtime to work, it has to be constructed in a way that keeps the listener engaged and immersed in what's going on. And I think they've composed these songs in a way that does aid some of that kind of like hefty length. However, I will come back to that later on.
Tabling that.
Yeah, just
right there.
Sidebar. At the core of this, there's still that kind of like huge, corrosively sludgy kind of weight that Lord Dying do extremely well. The majority of these tracks have a colossal riff that'll make you smile and start to kind of nod along. There was plenty of moments scattered throughout the album that I really kind of locked onto. The groove on "I Am Nothing, I Am Everything" is absolutely killer. Loved it. It reminded me a little bit of a band called Trials, who we spoke about years ago. But they're kind of lean on the thrashier side, but they've got a bit of kind of sludge in there as well. But the way that Lord Dying kind of weave it together a bit, so like there's bits of blast beats in there, and there's a more kind of extreme metal kind of guitar tone in there as well, which is really cool. I like that a lot of their sludge stuff isn't overly predictable either. Like the tempo and the rhythm isn't always kind of indicative of kind of typical sludge music. It's usually got a different spin on it, which I quite like. They like to keep it quite fresh sounding. Facing the Incomprehensible is another track worth mentioning that really delivers in the kind of riffs department. Again, really interesting rhythmically, which they do really well. It's almost like a kind of thrashy, kind of blackened sludge. Big kind of epic chords in it. Almost kind of evokes a kind of bit of a kind of Gojira type kind of sound to it at times. And I like there's a kind of attack of various vocal styles that kind of scatter throughout the track as well. It's a really clever idea to kind of add a bit of impact to certain parts of the track, which I really liked. And it's kind of like what Lord Dying do on top of the kind of sludge stuff that's the kind of most interesting here, I think. The moments where they do push the boundaries a little bit more, and that's been there before. They've done this type of thing before where they go a bit more clean, a bit more. There's a little bit more a bit prog in there, some kind of folkier moments. It's not a million miles away from a band like Opeth, to be honest. But on Clandestine Transcendence, they also get a little bit more gothic, which I quite liked. The likes of Unto Becoming, it still has that Lord Dying kind of bite to it, with little kind of elements of prog in the riffs, almost like a slightly more gothic Mastodon at times. But there's some nice kind of background synths, and vocally, Eric Olsen has a more kind of like crooning type style, which was a cool kind of switch up on the album. I quite like that. But it's not the only time he leans into that, which was cool. So it doesn't feel like a style they've just like will implement it on that track and then never come back to it. You know, there's little bits of it scattered throughout the album in subtle ways. I loved when they go a little bit more soulful as well. A Bond Broken by Death. I think Eric's vocals on that track are fantastic. There's also some really nice kind of classic rock type guitar harmonies, which couple up really well with the more soulful vocals on the track. Also pairs really nicely with the following track, which is Breaking the Clouds. It's a bit darker and a bit more kind of haunting in style. And I think at that point, I kind of realised how much is actually going on vocally on this album. They cover a hell of a lot of ground. Eric's got a real kind of like plethora of styles that he works with. And tonally as well, you've got the addition of vocals from the bassist Alyssa as well, so that kind of adds another layer to the kind of vocal attack as well, which I think is really well done. They also get a little bit weirder on certain tracks as well, dancing on the emptiness, which is a bit more experimental in the guitar work, a little bit, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's funky in the bass playing, but it's a little bit more kind of like freestyle, but you know, a little bit playful in the bass. It had elements I liked. I thought the parts where the instrumentation all kind of like synced up and they played little kind of accent, I thought that was really cool. It was very tight. It dragged on a little bit too long for me, and I kind of started to zone out a little bit. And I think that's probably my main complaint on this album. As much as this is probably the most varied thing they've done, I do think it is a touch too long. I think the album ends in a really kind of brilliant fashion with the Endless Road Home. It's got a really good chorus, and it leaves you with something kind of floating around your head. But I felt like there were a lot of moments before that where I was just kind of, especially in the last third of the album for some reason, I started to kind of switch off a bit. So the tracks in that last part didn't quite grab me as much as the tracks from the first half of the album. I didn't feel like the hooks were quite as kind of potent in that part of the release. The production, obviously, on Clandestine Transcendence is very good. I love the tone of the drums, the guitar tone. Its heaviest sounds absolutely huge. And the sound of the album does sound very organic, which is a big Kurt Ballou kind of trademark. I don't know if I would say it's a signature Ballou production, though. I can usually tell straight away when he's involved in something. But a lot of the production techniques on this felt quite subtly done. I think like if you look close enough, you might find things, but it's not obvious. I didn't think it was like that sounds like Kurt Ballou. It's not predictable or you know, like I just didn't think it screamed Kurt Ballou to me for some reason. But I think as an album, I enjoyed a lot of it. I think it's another great example of the band are continuing to grow and expand their kind of palette, but it also shows some real control in their songwriting to make sure the newer ideas work kind of cohesively with their kind of core foundations or core sound. A few of the tracks weren't quite as stand out as the rest, and I think it is a touch too long personally. If you're a fan of Lord Dying, then more Lord Dying on an album than normal probably won't be a huge issue for you. But I don't know if it'd be an album that I'll come back to a huge amount just because of the kind of length of it. What about yourself? What did you make of Clandestine Transcendence?
So like yourself, this was my kind of first time sitting down listening to the band. As always, I didn't do nearly the amount of due diligence you did in terms of trawling through the back catalogue. And I didn't know it was a concept album either. So actually maybe cleans up a couple of the issues that I had overall. I'll say at its best, it's a very, very interesting album with loads going on. Which is, I kind of live by the sword, die by the sword, which I'll get back to in a minute. Weirdly enough, the track that I engaged with most seems to be the track that you didn't engage with and you switched off with. I think the midway mark with track 5, Dancing on the Emptiness, is like a high water mark for this album. It's very Mastodon. It's very Crack the Sky era Mastodon. In the best possible way. Love the kind of the kind of deeper style of singing. Kind of does have that kind of more theatrical gothy feel about it, and I think it really works with the musicality. And they have these kind of old school rock licks going on with it in between the playing, which is really exciting. It just has a full, vibrant feel to it. So I really sunk into that. His aggressive vocal tone is very Randy Blythe. I kind of love it. It's kind of Randy Blythe of like a decade ago. He didn't use it nearly as much as I was expecting. I think one of the big things, and probably why you made the comment about the kind of last third of the album maybe not capturing the same way, is the album is predominantly weighted for the heavy material at the start. And then after you get through a brief return to physical form, the tracks after that like start to go a lot cleaner, or there's a lot more. Well, there's a lot of the aggression behind the vocals. Even the tempo of the album kind of slows off at that point. Now, without knowing the full concept of what they're trying to do here, that might actually make sense if they're telling a story. You know, that idea of trying to acclimate to situations out with the control, the struggle at the start, which tapers off at the end to acceptance, realization, or whatever that is, that might work. I didn't know any of that, and to be honest with you, I think even if I did know that, I would probably agree. I think the album for me is very front loaded with really, 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 really clever songwriting and like moments which just sparkle to me in lots of sections. I think it does have a slight identity crisis on the back half. I actually almost felt like there was an option here for kind of a double album, like one that handled the heavier side, one that handled the cleaner side, and then a story that connected the two. I think they could have probably got away with that. It would have been 2 half-an-hour albums, but I think there's an option there for them. Like you say, if you're a fan of the band, I can't imagine. Like, listen, if 9 Inch Nails next week said we're putting out a new album, it's an hour and a half, so it's an hour and a half long, I would lap that up because that's my favorite band. So I'm gonna go and do that. So I imagine if you're a fan of the band, that's there. And you know, it's not an issue for me. It was an issue for me though. I felt this album did really feel its length. I would probably trim quite close to 10 minutes off this if given the option. And it's not because I don't think there's like weak tracks on here. It's not. I just felt fatigued listening to it. I just felt like it was labouring a lot of points, where at the beginning it felt very tight and very precise. By the end of it, it felt a bit more relaxed and, for lack of a better word, a bit flabby. I found a lot to really, really enjoy on this. I like the production. I think you can hear it's in the hands of someone that knows what he's doing. Like, everything is just so clean and polished and pristine and heavy and nasty when it needs to be, especially on those sludgier sections. But when the band extend into areas where like the nuance needs to be heard to understand the musicality that's playing, it's all clear as a bell here. I think working with those ranges as well, specifically vocally, you know, that's all locked in as well in a way where it transcends between those vocal parts very, very, very easy, and it's mastered at just like a immaculate level. I suppose for me, I don't know if I know who Lord Dying are at the end of this album on the first listen. I hear a lot of ideas, but if, like I say, if they are telling a story, that kind of makes sense to me. But whereas, and I'm going to compare it back to the album that it reminded me of the most, which is Crack the Sky by Mastodon, I felt that even when the band went spacey and weird and then conventional Mastodon on the album, there was a real clear sense of identity on it. And this one, I didn't get that on every single song. And at points, I kind of felt like I was almost kind of trying to find the identity of the band. Once again, explaining their back catalogue and the transitions they went through. This is maybe them coalescing around various ideas and structuring it up. And as a result, you're getting like essentially a decade's worth of the band experimenting on this one, which would make sense. Like bands that you mentioned, Opeth earlier on, listen to later day Opeth and then go back and listen to early day Opeth without context, you are going to be like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, bands evolve, they change, they try new ideas, and I'm coming in relatively late to the you know, to the races here on this one. Like yourself, I don't know how quick I would be to return to this. I appreciate a lot of what's on here. I just personally think it's a bit self-indulgent in parts which don't necessarily grab me the way that other aspects do. I personally feel that the band should have either committed to do more heavy parts or actually made it a lot cleaner all the way through. I think that kind of loss of identity halfway through the album doesn't necessarily do a lot of favours. But as I said before, maybe conceptually that fits with the story that they're telling, and if that's the case, I can't argue with that. Plus, I didn't write the album, so it's just how it makes me feel. So yeah, I wasn't particularly sold on this one, if I'm honest, overall. But I think if you have followed the band's journey up to this point, I mean, this is musicality on a high level. There's nothing you can fault it with there. So I imagine you'll enjoy this one quite a bit.
Yep. Okay, so scores for the new Lord Dying album. I really enjoyed this up until a point, and then it just kind of meandered away at the end. It sounds great. The band sound very good. The production's very good. I think it'll be an album that I come back to and maybe listen to the first kind of half of the album, or might cherry pick tracks from it. I'm not sure. I don't know how much I'm going to come back to it and listen to it as a full kind of concept album. I'm going to go 3.5 on this one. What are you thinking yourself?
I'm coming in on a 3 on this one. Like I say, it feels like I feel nasty giving that grade out, because it's not a grade I give out much. And even though it still equates to, you know, what, 60%, 6 out of 10, or whatever the calculation is, to me, I personally feel it for my musical tastes, I think it loses me about the halfway mark, and it never really captures me back after that. And had the front half of the album been more like the back half, I actually think I would have taken to it really, really well all the way through. Or vice versa. The back half of the album had been much more like the front half, still keeping that track 5, that long 8-minute behemoth, and there on either version of it. I think it would have worked really, really, really well. But just one man's opinion, Dave. One man's opinion. 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5. Lord Dying, Clandestine Transcendence, out on January 19th on MNRK Heavy. Links below to the band and the pre-order. Check it out, have a listen, see what you think, let us know, stick some comments in. That is a review. Thanks for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.